Thanks for clicking! The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board has just released its data for the month of February, showing a real estate market that appears to be heating up.
I'm kind of a big deal.
Very. However, as we'll see today, although prices are up all across the board in Toronto, I think the big story is the one that you won't see in the headlines, in that there's a flood of new inventory hitting the market as well. And while the news points to a market where buyers are coming back in droves, pushing up prices, trying to get into the market ahead of the rate cuts that have been promised by the usual suspects, the data also comes as Derek Holt from Scotia Bank says that the Bank of Canada cutting rates prematurely would be the dumbest thing it could do.
And that's exactly what you should do.
So what I want to do today is go over Toronto's real estate data for the month of February, take a look at the number of new listings coming to the market, go over Derek Holt's assessment of the Bank of Canada's path moving forward and the dumb things the real estate industry has been promising, and then go over some implications. The Bank of Canada is set to make its policy rate announcement tomorrow and hold its press conference soon thereafter, and we'll obviously have an update out on both on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this data. Onto the data. First up, the benchmark price. The benchmark price, if you'll remember, that's the price of a home that represents the most popular set of features, and the benchmark price was up in February. In January, the benchmark was sitting at $1,065,800, and that jumped up over $28,000 to $1,093,900. So the benchmark is up $28,100 from last month, and up $2,000 from this point in time last year, back when the media was heralding the return of the hot real estate market.
And nowhere to go but up.
And while the benchmark was only up $28,000, the average price was up substantially more. The average price in January was sitting at $1,026,703, and that jumped up to $1,108,720. So that's an increase of about $82,000 in the average price in 1 month's time, but the average price is only up about $13,000 from the same point in time last year. And the median price jumped up substantially as well. The median price, that's where half as many homes sell over that price and half as many sell under. The median price in January was $890,000, and that jumped exactly $80,000 to $970,000. So the median price is up exactly $80,000 since January, but up $30,000 since this point in time in 2023. With that said, though prices are up, inventory relative to demand isn't up that much, if at all. If we look at the months of inventory measurement, the MOI, which measures if no more homes came to market, how long would it take for Toronto to completely run out of homes for sale, the MOI in January was 2.4 and remained at 2.4 in February. And finally, the sales to list price ratio, which measures by how much over or under asking a home sells. So if a home is listed for $100,000 and sells for $101,000, the SLPR would be 101. The SLPR was up substantially in February, sitting at 98 in January, and jumping up 3% to 101 last month. So for the first time since September, homes are now selling over asking in Toronto. With that said, take that number with a grain of salt, as we're all well aware of the industry practice of purposefully underpricing homes, inciting a bidding war, and then saying that the market is hot because those homes sold over ask.
Can we do sleight of hand tricks?
Speaking of which, as a brief side note, did anyone see this tweet making the rounds where people were being offered $250 to $500 to submit dummy offers to increase interest in GTA listings? And this isn't the first time. We heard something similar happening in Quebec about a month ago.
I will allow that.
Why the need for these tactics if the market is so hot? So, in summary, the benchmark price is up about $28,000, the average and median prices both up about $80,000, inventory relative to demand is about the same, and homes are selling for over asking again. With all of that said, there is a lot more inventory coming to the market, with a 33.5% increase in the number of new listings coming to the market since February of last year, leading to a 15.1% increase in the number of active listings available. In fact, this was the largest amount of new listings Toronto has seen come to the market in February, except for COVID, since 2012. Given that, as the TRREB says, consumers are coming back into the market in anticipation of interest rate cuts, then why are sellers listing their properties in the largest numbers, save COVID, since 2012?
I'm so good at my job.
Sure, but if rate cuts are going to send prices skyrocketing, then why are these sellers not just waiting this out? This tells me there's potential stress in the system. But what about sales? What about all of the demand that's coming back to the market? If you look across all of the media headlines, the amount of sales, the number of sales is the biggest headline. Yet, if we look at the data, we can see that the sales numbers aren't all that spectacular for the month of February, far below the 12-year average of 6,773, and even if we take out those COVID years, still far below the 12-year average of 6,076. So sales numbers, demand, is far below what it's been over the past 12 years, except for COVID. It's not clear why these sales numbers are the ones making the headlines.
Just remember who you're working for.
And of the sales that we do have, many of them are coming, at least according to TRREB, from consumer expectations of rate cuts. And who could blame them? Consumers have been told ad nauseum over the past few months that rate cuts are coming to a theater near us imminently. Yet, as it was last year, these prophecies of rate cuts could be their own downfall, with some noting that the resurgence of the housing market could delay the rate cuts. VP of Capital Markets at Scotia Bank, Derek Holt, says that it would be pretty awkward for the Bank of Canada to cut in what looks to be a hot spring real estate market and an impending stimulative government budget. And that makes sense. As we saw today, prices are already rising, reminiscent of what we saw in 2023. When predictions of rate cuts abounded, yields fell even before SVB. Mortgage rates followed, and by the summer, the Bank of Canada raised rates, at least in part, due to the hot housing market. As such, while some, you-know-who, are predicting imminent rate cuts as early as spring, they've pushed back those bets from March, Holt says that that would be about the dumbest thing that the Bank of Canada could do. Instead, says Holt, the Bank of Canada won't even be cutting in June, with Scotiabank pushing back its first rate cut prediction back to September. And yeah, we've talked about this at great length on this channel. Given what we know about the spring market and what happens when the Bank of Canada cuts rates, we just did this. The bank is going to try to avoid cutting rates in the spring market as best that it can. But, on a more macro level, I think the pattern should be clear by now. Monetary experts pump interest rate cuts as best they can. Buyers try to front-run those cuts, getting into the market before an apartment condo costs $8 million.
Minimum.
The housing market takes off, and then the Bank of Canada ultimately doesn't raise rates because the housing market took off.
No one could have predicted this.
Meanwhile, those defective crystal balls have already made their money, and on it goes. Not a bad system if you're the crystal ball, not a great system if you bought here. So, all in all, it does look like Toronto's real estate prices are heating back up, though maybe not by as much as is being portrayed in the media. There is nothing special about February sales data, except maybe it's lower than it should be. It's lower than the 12-year average. However, there is something special about the new listings coming to the market, as the number of new listings, except for COVID, is at a 12-year high, and that is definitely an outlier. With that said, if prices continue to take off, if we do see the housing market start to take off on lower yields, on lower fixed rates, then the likelihood of those rate cuts actually materializing continues to diminish. We will continue to track the Bank of Canada and its interest rate decisions, as well as the effects of those decisions on the Toronto real estate market on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, thanks so much for watching.